right. So our final story tonight is Cornell West and RFK Jr. Unity. And if you haven't had a chance to do so, don't forget to answer that poll because that question is in reference to this story. So recently, RFK Jr. and Cornel West obviously have been getting a lot of flack from mainstream media, not even just in reference to their policies, but in reference to them running at all. Honestly, questions like, why are you here? Or statements from mainstream media like, we've already given this to Joe Biden. Those kind of things. I want to start off by showing you two different interviews. One interview of Cornel West with Stephen A. Smith. Stephen A. Smith is a sports commentator. I first heard about him from a show called First Take on ESPN. So he's well known in the sports world, but he also has his own podcast. The second interview I'm going to show you is RFK Jr. with Tucker Carlson. So you're going to see a piece from both. And then I'm going to try to pull this all together and make a point. And that point could be, especially considering RFK Jr.'s most recent tweet about Cornel West, is it possible that there could be some type of unity between the two? Now, that's given the consideration that RFK Jr. is going to change his position on Israel and Palestine after this conversation with Max Blumenthal, which I showed you in that interview, a new one. He said he's supposed to be talking to him in a couple of weeks, although according to Max's tweet the other day, Max says that's not what he was told, but we'll see. But if he has this conversation with people like Max and he changes his position on that issue, there's some other things I think he would need to change too. But let's say he did, and he loses the Democrat primary. Should RFK Jr. team up with Cornel West, and should they run together? That's the question on the poll. Let's get into the interview here with Cornel West and Stephen A. Smith. I want to play a piece of this first, where Stephen A. Smith is actually, in so many ways, basically saying to Cornel West, why would you run right now, given the fact that the people are so divided? And I want you to hear Cornel West's response to this question, because I think it's a good response.
In all sincerity, why now? Because I know it's been bad, but there's a level of hopelessness that I think has infiltrated politics in such a way that I've never seen in my lifetime. I'm 55 years of age. I've never seen it like this. Even when we saw people like yourself, obviously you were born before me, and because of that, you were living in the midst of the civil rights era. You saw unfairness, you saw degradation, you saw a lot of heinous and insidious things taking place in our country. But for some reason, no matter what trials and tribulations this nation or a segment of our populace was enduring, Dr. West, there was always hope. I look at the divide right now, and truth doesn't matter. It's what I want. Whatever it is that I want, that's all that matters. There's no compromise. Compromise is not a priority. Truth is not a priority. And that begs the question, why run now when hopelessness seems to have pervaded the proverbial proceedings?
Now, I feel like Stephen A. Smith basically answered his own question. He should run now because of the hopelessness, because people have given up, because people see that there seems to be no win with either one of these parties for the American people. There's win for corporations and for the MIC, but not for the people, especially if you're poor, you're working class. So I felt like he kind of answered his own question. But listen to what Cornel West says.
Oh, well, I think that's a powerful reason for running, because keep in mind, I'm running for truth and justice. I mean, the presidency happens to be just a vehicle and a vessel for it. But right when the moment is at its dimmest and grimmest is the time when you have to try to cast your light in the form of your witness and your work. And in the same way to you in your own context, you got to bear witness. You got to cast your light. And most importantly, be yourself and be true to those who love you. All the love poured into you, all the love poured into me, all the integrity poured into me by Irene and Clifton West, Shiloh Baptist West, Black Panther Party, all of my different friends. And I have friends that come from different ideological and political perspectives. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That I don't look for political agreement. I think of a brother like James Brown. You know, James Brown, one of the greatest,
of course,
journalists of our day.
That's right. Yes, I do. I know him personally. He's a mentor and a friend. He's one of the great human beings you'll ever meet on this earth.
That's precisely it. You know, he was my roommate at Harvard.
Wow.
And you know, I go to him both for prayer, advice, insight. We don't begin by talking about politics. We begin by talking about our family. His mother was a gem and a jewel, Mrs. Brown, just beyond language, just like my mother. But you see, those are the kind of relationships that's gone into shaping one. Mm-hmm. And when you have that kind of blessing or those kinds of blessings in your life, then by the time you get into politics and you see what you see in politics, hatred, greed, revenge, manipulation, people saying anything just in order to win, people finding out what their deepest convictions are by checking what the polls are, changing their views overnight. Hey, what happened to truth? What happened to justice? What happened to integrity, honesty, decency? What happened to generosity? What happened to humility and fallibility? I don't mind telling folk I got gangster and thug in me because I do, but I'm trying to be better. I don't mind telling folk I don't have the full truth because I want to learn and listen. I'm a jazz man, just like this brother right here, Coltrane. You learn how to learn. You learn how to listen. You learn how to allow others to raise their voices. But most importantly, brother, you learn how to take a stand. You're not spineless. You're not just going with the flow.
What about people that...
That's a good point. So the point that I wanted to make there with that comment from Dr. West is the fact that Stephen A. Smith basically is just like, do it when it's easy. Don't do it when it's difficult. Don't do it when people don't have hope. Don't do it when the country is divided. Don't do it when, what if people listen to that type of rhetoric during the civil rights movement? Don't do it right now, Dr. King. The country is divided, and the country was divided then. Really divided. Don't do it now. Don't you do that march on Washington. The country is divided. People have lost hope. What if Dr. King listened to that? What if all the other civil rights activists listened to that? What if Fred Hampton listened to that? What if Malcolm X listened to that? You see the problem with where we have gone as a society when we have gotten to the point where people only want you to really push or fight for something when it's easy. That's where we are now. Don't do it when it's tough. Too hard. Too difficult. People might get angry. Think about that. And this next question here, and then we'll go on to the RFK one.
Look at Dr. Cornell West, and they say to themselves, you are a black man, highly educated, far more knowledgeable than most of us. I know I've learned so much from just listening to you. I watch you every chance that I get when you're doing interviews with various people because it's just edifying, to be quite honest with you. And they look at you and they say, you know so much and you talk about everyone on an equal playing scale, as opposed to speaking about, okay, black folks are at a disadvantage. And when you talk about it from that perspective, it's appreciated. When you talk about other folks who have suffered, some people have said, Dr. Cornel West, what about us? What about us? What about us? What do you say to that, particularly in this day and age when we're witnessing the times that we're witnessing in, and the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the college admissions issue with the Supreme Court, and race being omitted as a consideration, and all of these other things that people point to, and they look at you and they feel like you're supposed to take a different position than you have taken. How do you respond to that?
In other words, Stephen A. Smith is basically saying that Dr. West should mainly focus on black issues and only black issues. That's really what Stephen A. Smith is saying. Dr. West speaks to the pain and suffering of different groups. He doesn't omit the pain and suffering of black people. We talked about that on the show. Obviously, he's pro reparations. He's talked about that. That's part of his platform. But he also talks about the pain and suffering of the Palestinians, the pain and suffering of working class people in general and poor people, the pain and suffering of people who have all this tremendous debt that they still carrying around, medical debt, college debt. He speaks to all different types of pain and suffering. But what Stephen A. Smith is basically saying and trying to go around it in a roundabout way, how come you just not mainly focusing on black issues and that's it? not thinking about the fact that race is class and class is race. So race and class are intertwined. Now, that does not mean that there aren't certain issues that are only really affect Black people. But when you say the working class and then you say Black people as though that's separate, it's not separate. We are the working class. The majority of us are the working class. So that's what people like someone like Steven has to understand. Now, he'll say all that, and people will say all of this to Cornel West, but then they'll still go vote for Joe Biden, who's not speaking on any of those issues. That's what kills me. So let me let him answer this.
Well, one is, though, brother, you can't talk about integrity for me unless you talk about moral consistency.
Yes, sir.
Now, I'm also a revolutionary Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus of Nazareth. What does that mean? That means that
all people,
everybody has the same significance. They're made in the image of a great God. I don't care what color you are, what gender, what sexual orientation. I don't care what national identity you are from. You have the equal status and significance. So I'm trying to love everybody, but I begin on the chocolate side of town. How come? Because my mom and daddy were chocolate. They shaped me. Love thy neighbor as thyself. I couldn't even begin to love myself without acknowledging those who love me, that taught me what love is all about. But that love is not going to stay just on the chocolate side of town. No, my white brothers and sisters are suffering. I'm in solidarity with them. I want to do everything I can to alleviate it. If my indigenous brothers and sisters, if my Spanish speaking, if my Latino, if Lithuanians, if Ethiopians, Ukrainians, across the board, Russians, across the board, it's a human thing. You see what I mean? It's profoundly human. It really is.
Let me go to this. You initially ran under the People's Party, and you.
Okay, and then they get into that, which we've already covered. I've already covered that on the show like multiple times. So now we're going to go into the RFK Jr. interview with Tucker Carlson, and I'm going to show you how these two are connected. Now, we're going to dive right into the issue of the Secret Service and RFK Jr. Listen to this.
Bobby Kennedy Jr., thank you for joining us. So I noticed when you showed up, you've been on the road for weeks, you had no Secret Service with you, which is a little weird given that your father was murdered while running for president, as you now are. Why wouldn't you have Secret Service protection?
Well, I did do a tweet on that got 30 million views when we got rejected. We applied in May for Secret Service protection. Secret Service protection was only allocated to the nominees of the parties prior to 1968. But when my father was killed, they changed the law immediately, and all of the people who were running against him, including George Wallace, immediately got Secret Service protection. So the law says that you're entitled to Secret Service protection automatically 100 days out. But the president also has discretion to give Secret Service protection to any candidate for any reason. And there are criteria, which is that you have to have 15% of polling results for a limited period of time. But he even can overrule that. For example, President Obama was given Secret Service protection 441 days out, or 551 days out, even though he had only, I think, 5% support at that time. My uncle Teddy was given Secret Service protection 450 days out, even though he had not even declared for his presidency. And so he and Carter hated each other. President Carter was, the president of his own party, and Teddy had been enormously critical of him. And personally, they had a very personal antipathy for one another. And Teddy ended up running against him.
I want to pause here for a second, because one of the reasons that people have been saying that they believe they're not giving RFK Jr. a Secret Service is because he's primarying a sitting Democrat. But actually, he just debunked that reason, because if Teddy Kennedy was given Secret Service when he primary challenged Jimmy Carter, that just goes to show you that's not the reason. So let's continue.
But when he was moving into that decision to run, Carter, in a very classy move, gave him Secret Service protection. We applied for it. I get a lot of threats, a lot of death threats, and I get, a lot of people who are, for example, about 2 weeks ago, a mentally ill person made it to the second story of my house, and that is a very, very common occurrence.
Inside your house?
Yeah, inside my house. Before, somebody who was working there stopped them and then called the police. And we gave the Secret Service a 67, in fact, Gavin DeBecker, who you've had on this show,
yes,
who's runs the premier security service in the world, put together a 67-page report, which included 28 pages of all the threats of, typical threats against me and other indicia that I should have Secret Service protection. And I assumed the president would give it to me because, it just seems like bad judgment not to give it to me. If you go even on my Twitter feed, probably one out of, every 30 or 40 comments says, oh, you're going to get killed or something like that. It takes notice of the peculiar threats to my family, family members who are in this business. So it's something that, the average American is aware of.
Yeah, your name is Robert F. Kennedy.
Yeah. And so it was an odd decision. I got a letter. Gavin actually got the letter because he had been doing, and by the way, I want to say this, the Secret Service themselves were wonderful. They were very, very encouraging, and they were very helpful at every step along the way. And I believe, and I can't speak for them, but I believe that their assumption was that we were going to get Secret Service protection. In fact, they told Gavin, we're going to send somebody out there within 10 days to interview Cheryl and Bobby and to tell them what it's going to look like. Because there's a lot of questions about, do I go to the gym? Do I have them? All of these questions that I don't know the answers to. And they come and they have a standard process for informing you. But then they went dark. And they said, a decision is made very quickly within 14 days, is what they told us. And they said, we have 8 details standing by ready to go, so we can do this very quickly. And then they went dark, and for 88 days, we didn't hear from them. And then I got the letter from Mayorkas, Alexander Mayorkas, who's the director of DHS, saying that we've determined that you don't need Secret Service protection.
Okay, so you guys heard that part there, that they basically told RFK Jr. that they determined that he doesn't need Secret Service protection. I don't know if Cornel West has asked for Secret Service protection or not. He'll be here next week, so he'll be back on the show. I'll ask him when he comes back on. But this is a very, very telling sign. First, you have Stephen A. Smith basically in so many words saying to Cornel West, why are you running, man? Like, why are you doing this? You think this is a good idea? Like that kind of thing. And then you have RFK Jr. being denied Secret Service request, which appears that he did request. And I'm going to go to this next question here from Tucker, and then we're going to go on to the critics.
It's very obvious, and you've confirmed it, that there are threats against your life, against your family. That's known. And so if they deny you protection and they know that, what message are they sending?
That they really want you gone. That's the message they're sending. They want him gone. They don't want either one of them in this race.
I don't really know what they're doing. And by the way, we've looked, and there's a guy called Jeremy Hammond who's done a really good article, a really thorough article about the past. And he was not able, and we were not able to find a single presidential candidate who had requested protection from the president and was not given protection. Herman Cain got it, I think, 500 days out. Jesse Jackson, Shirley Chisholm, George Bush, and Ronald Reagan got it something 500 or 600 days out when they first ran. So it's just standard operating procedure. And particularly people who are polling around anywhere over 15%, which I have been for 4 or 5 months now, are regarded as it's been treated as pro forma. And I am the outlier. I'm the single outliner that we could find that was denied Secret Service.
Why do you think that is?
Okay, and I'm not going to play all of this. You want to watch the full interview? It's episode 16. RFK Jr. explains Ukraine, etc. I'm not going to read everything on here. You can find it on Twitter. Tucker Show is now on Twitter. But you see, everybody got it except for him, right? And I don't even agree with some of RFK Jr.'s policies, but they're trying to send a message. And it's not just obviously the Democratic Party, but it's also mainstream media. I want to show you something. I haven't watched these women in a long time because they really just irk my nerve. I find them to be annoying. And that's the women from The View. Well, what was interesting is that recently they did actually decide to talk about Cornell West. And I want you to notice something that happens in this discussion. Now, Sunny is going to go into policy in reference to Cornell West. Watch what happens when she brings up policy.
I think that you have to make up straw men. You have to make up a boogeyman underneath the bed when you have no policies, when you have no program, when you have no real vision for this country. People are talking about, Cornell West, I'm biased. He is my friend. And people are saying, he was at Harvard and he was really, really progressive.
Let's pause there for a second. So Cornell West even knows Sunny. See, that's the thing about Cornel West being in some of these spaces, especially as an academic. He's traveled a lot. He's met a lot of people, and including people like Sunny. And that's the thing, that this actually throws a curveball into this election for mainstream media and for the Democratic Party. Because what do you say in reference to someone like Cornel West, who has already been on CNN and Fox News and all of these stations before he ever ran? He's been on these shows multiple times. He knows people like Sunny. He knows a lot of these people who talk about these elections. What do you say when it's Cornel West? It was easier for them, I think, to smear someone like Jill Stein. A lot of people didn't know who Jill Stein was before she ran. It was easier for them to smear someone like Ralph Nader. It was easier for them to smear someone like anybody running independent, et cetera, that kind of thing. It was easier for them to do that. But when it comes to someone like Cornel West, now you're in a different ballgame, because this is someone who's beloved by so many people because of the work that he's done, not just on the academic side, but the work that he's done in the community. And he's been solid and he stood firm on the issues when it wasn't popular to do so. So this is where it gets tricky. Watch what they do. Let's go back just a little bit here. Particularly Joy, Miss, I support Bernie Sanders. Remember that? I was a Bernie. And then come 2020, she said she was joking. She named her dog Bernie and all that shit. These women are so fake.
Harvard, and he was really, really progressive. Well, but look at his. Let's finish this. But my point to it is just his platform. He actually has a platform, and it's implementing. But he's going to be wrong.
You see what happens there? Once Sunny says his platform, and she starts to mention the policies, notice how they're quick to interrupt her? Just something I noticed, that's all. Watch. When she starts to mention the policies, watch this.
Actually has a platform, and it's implementing. But he's going to be wrong against Biden. Which is not smart.
You see this? Joy jumps in and goes, but he's going to be running against Biden. Not smart, but he's going to be. See how quick they come in? By the way, these women have, you see these little earpieces? So they get cues from the producers. The producers tell them when to rap. The producers tell them when to stop talking and all that kind of stuff. They're not on their own free will here.
Finish this. But my point to it is just his platform. He actually has a platform, and it's implementing. But he's going to be wrong against Biden. Which is not smart, but forgiving all student debt, guaranteeing health care for all, stopping foreign military aid, fighting mass incarceration, ending drilling on public land.
Oh, he wants Russia to win in Ukraine?
That's a plan.
But Republicans do have
limited government.
You disagree with it.
And what they're doing right here, Democrat and Republican arguing against each other this way, that is exactly why it's good to have a third party candidate. You see this? See how she jumps in and says, but Republicans have it and she's like, well, he has a plan. Well, the Republicans have it. That's why. See, this is why there's so many more people registering as independents. We don't want anything to do with this. We don't want anything to do with this BS. Sonny is a Democrat. She's a Republican. And then there are some of us somewhere just like, both of you are ridiculous, and neither one of these parties is helping the people. This right here, hallmark moment for you. This is exactly why people are leaving these parties. So let me let them finish.
But Republicans do have
limited government.
You disagree with it.
Can I just finish my thing?
Yeah, but as a Republican, I feel like I should be able to say what our plan is.
Well, you can. I just wanted to finish what my point was. That's all. And that is simply, you know how I feel about polls.
Notice how Whoopi always comes in to try to change the conversation and to wrap it up and then cut to commercial. They all have their roles. So I'm pretty sure Whoopi got a signal in her ear to come in, interrupt this discussion, and wrap this shit up. Watch.
Do not trust them because they are skewed always to the people who are doing them. And the other thing about Cornell.
Now all of a sudden it's don't trust the polls. But when Joe Biden was doing so well, it was just look at the polls. Now all of a sudden you can't trust the polls, they say.
West, and he's also a friend of mine. I have a great deal of respect for him. But realistically, I'm waiting for someone running for president to say, listen, this is all the stuff I'd like to do, but I know I'm going to have to deal with Congress and Senate and all these other people, so that I may not be able, but this is what I'd like to do. I just want somebody to say what they'd like to say.
And Cornell West has been doing that. Whoopi always comes in at the end of the discussion to make these obvious statements that she wishes people would say that they've already said. She did this to Bernie Sanders. She did this to Andrew Yang. She did this to Marianne Williamson. She did this to Tulsi Gabbard. She always does this. I just wish someone is running, just coming and say, here's what I would like to do. As if nobody has been saying that. Mainstream media. Now that's The View. But then there's also MSNBC. And you have pawns like Simone Sanders and Chuck Todd. They don't want Cornel West or RFK Jr. running either. Look at what they do here, both of them. Watch this.
The call is coming from inside the House. Which House? The House of Representatives. A moderate congressman from Minnesota is calling on his fellow Democrats to primary President Biden, while Representative Dean Phillips hasn't decided if he will challenge President Biden in 2024. He's encouraging others to, quote unquote, jump in to the race.
Now, this guy is corporate, FYI. Those of you not aware of Dean Phillips, he's corporate. He's basically, he wants a moderate. He doesn't want, obviously, anyone to the left or the right. He wants like a moderate person to run. He's a pro-business Democrat. All the clowns. Boy, I tell you.
Here is what Congressman Phillips told my colleague Chuck Todd this morning on Meet the Press.
People want to turn the page. I think that's fair to say. As a Democrat, I adore Joe Biden. He saved this country. He can cement his legacy. My real call to action right now is not about me. The call to action is to ask the president to pass the torch. There is an extraordinary bench of people ready to go, proximate,
who would you like to see in this race?
Problem number one, he said he adores Joe Biden. So there's his kiss up point right there. You know, this is just, boy, I tell you,
I would like to see a moderate governor, hopefully from the heartland, from one of the 4 states that Democrats will need. So this is the time to meet the moment. And I'm doing something that I know it's unpopular as a Democrat, but I'm speaking truth. That's my job, my duty.
So let me pause here for a second, and let me tell you, in other words, what he's really saying. He's saying he doesn't want anything to change. If you come forward and you say that you want like a moderate governor, moderate Democrat governor or whatever to run to be president, then you don't want anything to change. He wants things to stay the way that they are. He just doesn't want Joe Biden to be the one in office that's doing it, because obviously he has issues with Joe Biden, probably the mental capability that we talked about before, but he doesn't want things to change. He probably doesn't really disagree with Joe Biden in reference to policy. He really wants him, again, this is a pro-business Democrat. He just wants someone to come in and make sure that everything's going to stay the same and they're going to maintain the status quo. That's what he wants. A puppet. Now listen to Simone Sanders.
I met the congressman this morning. He's a lovely man, and yet speaking truth is part of his job, but it's also part of mine. So here's how I see it. I just don't think there's a legitimate appetite for another Democratic candidate.
Says who? Do you see what they do? Okay. So you got The View, you got Simone Sanders, you got Chuck Todd. These are the media gatekeepers. There's different types of gatekeeping. These are the media gatekeepers. They're the ones to make sure that everything just stays in place as it is and nothing really changes. Let me go back just a little bit.
Democratic candidate. Look at the polls. A recent New York Times Siena poll actually shows that President Biden's reelection bid is gaining support.
She gives away the problem right here. It's a New York Times poll. The New York Times is pro-Biden. The New York Times is just milk toast liberal garbage. That's all it is. That doesn't look like the polls that I've seen. Notice she shows you this poll. She doesn't show you the poll that says how many people don't want him to run again. They all have an agenda. See that? New York Times
shows that President Biden's reelection bid is gaining support among Democrats. And this is not an active primary, folks. President Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee for president.
Listen to this. Listen to what she says. I don't like this at all. Listen to this.
This is not an active primary, folks. President Biden is going to be the Democratic nominee for president. Other Democrats who have declared themselves candidates in the 2024 presidential primary, I'm talking about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Marianne Williamson, well, they trail President Biden by more than 50 points in that same poll.
In that same poll. The same poll, that's the New York Times poll, which favors Joe Biden. Do you see the problem here? She said there's no active Democratic primary. This is to mislead people. This is to convince the American people that it's not worth trying to even participate or entertain primary challenges to Joe Biden, because Simone Sanders told you it's not even active. This is Simone Sanders pretending like those two people, whether you agree with them or not, aren't actively out campaigning. Meanwhile, Joe Biden was on a beach yesterday while people in Hawaii are pleading for help. So it's just, I don't know how long they're going to continue to try to dupe the American people like this. So let's go on, which RFK Jr., his polling has gone down. I've seen it in multiple polls. So something has to, I don't know what happened there, but it could be the whole Israel-Palestine thing. I don't know.
Well, they trail President Biden by more than 50 points in that same poll. Plucking a moderate governor from a heartland state to run for president might sound like a solid strategy, but at this point in this particular election, doing so without an exploratory committee, a national level campaign apparatus, a plan to get on the ballot in the primary states, or even
When she mentions national level campaign, listen to this. I want to get your take on this, what she says.
A national level campaign.
Without a national level campaign, Joe Biden's not even campaigning. That's just something to take in. He's not even campaigning. He's not doing anything. Can you believe this woman was once a part of Bernie? She was part of Bernie Sanders' campaign in 2016. You see how quickly she sold out? Went from Bernie Sanders' campaign to the Joe Biden campaign. And Bernie ran again in 2020 and she went over to Joe Biden. Interesting.
Strategy, but at this point in this particular election, doing so without an exploratory committee, a national level campaign apparatus, a plan to get on the ballot in the primary states, or even an appetite from the people is just simply unrealistic. Hearing the congressman comments today, I just really had to wonder, why weren't these concerns addressed before President Biden announced his reelection campaign?
Now she's just flat out lying. Those concerns were addressed. People have been railing on Joe Biden since the moment he took office. People have been complaining about Joe Biden since the moment he took office. People were saying that someone else should run before Joe Biden announced his reelection. And Simone Sanders knows that. She's just lying. She's paid to lie. This is the same woman who was hoping that she was going to become Joe Biden's press secretary. He looked over her not once, but twice. The first time he assigned Jen Psaki. The second time he assigned Karine Jean-Pierre. So you got looked over twice for the same guy that you keep telling everybody to simp for. She's paid to do this. Paid to do this. You know, Simone Sanders knows Joe Biden ain't done anything for the black community. Come on. But she getting them checks. She making it rain. And that's all she care about. So that's that. Now, there have been some hiccups here and there, and I'm wondering if this is why things are starting to change. Recently, RFK Jr. was asked, I think this is when he's in Iowa. So he was asked this question recently by a reporter in reference to abortion bans. And I think you guys want to hear this because now his campaign has come out and they have retracted what he said and said, well, that's not what he meant to say, that kind of thing. And I'm playing this not to rail on him, but I'm playing this because I think this may play into where we're going in reference to unity between Cornell West and RFK Jr. in the first place. There was the policing comment, which JB reported on the other day. I think it was Sunday. JB talked about that on RBN. And now there's the abortion comment. I told you the closer we get to 2024, more and more attacks are going to come. So should the people who are constantly getting attacked by mainstream media, should those people join forces? Listen to this.
Would you sign a federal protection to protect the rights that were in the Roe precedent if you were president?
I believe that a decision to abort a child should be up to the women during the first 3 months of life.
So you would cap it at 15 weeks?
Yes.
Or 21 weeks?
Sorry, let me wind this back. His voice,
I got federal protection to protect the rights that were in the Roe precedent if you were president?
I believe that a decision to abort a child should be up to the women during the first 3 months of life.
So you would cap it at 15 weeks?
Yes.
Or 21 weeks?
Yeah, for 3 months.
So 3 months. You would sign a federal cap on that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So not unlimited access to abortion, as many in the Democratic Party.
I think the states, once a child is viable outside the womb, I think then the state has an interest in protecting that child. That supersedes, and I think that the state has an interest at every level, but at some point, I'm against I'm for medical freedom. I think individuals ought to be able to make their own choices.
Which is why I'm surprised to hear you say you'd cap it.
Well, because...
So let me pause here for a second to explain what's going on. So she was asking him if he would cap abortion at 15 weeks, and he said yes. And then he goes on to say that obviously he's for medical freedom, that type of thing. So now she's saying, well, I'm surprised why you're saying that you would cap it. So let me just explain that and let it continue.
You know, I think at some point you'd say the state, I would personally not. I think the states have a right to protect a child once the child becomes viable. That right increases. And I think there's very, very few abortions that are performed after that period of time anyway. Most abortions are performed during the first 3 months of life. And I think that's when, I feel I fought harder than anybody in this country for medical freedom.
Okay. So as you can imagine, RFK Jr. has received a lot of criticism for that comment, but his campaign did send out a message basically saying that he retracts that. I thought I had that up here. I'm sorry. I'll find it later. But that he was retracting that was not what he meant when he answered the question that way, that he supports a woman's right to choose. So I want to make sure I put that part in there. But then there was another one. There was also the policing question. Now, this is in South Carolina, in Charleston, South Carolina. And I've lived in South Carolina, went to college in South Carolina. And I don't understand where he went wrong on this question either. Because for me, it's like, considering what has happened in Charleston, South Carolina, why would you oppose removing qualified immunity? So he's getting a lot of heat for this one too. And stay with me. I swear this is all connected.
On your website, you said you want to remove qualified immunity and transform the police. What does that look like for you to transform the police?
Yeah, I don't, if it says on my website that we're going to remove qualified immunity, that's wrong.
So that part right there, some people are, thank you, Eric. Some people are not happy about hearing that. So apparently his website says one thing, that they would remove qualified immunity in reference to policing. But in this interview, he said, if that's what's on the website, that's wrong. So some people are just kind of like, well, what else is wrong or incorrect on your website? And for me, and I'm tell you right now, for the people who were in Charleston, South Carolina, and remember the police officers chasing down a black man and shooting him in the back, and he had no weapon. And for the people who remember, particularly in Charleston, South Carolina, how the police treated someone like Dylan Roof when he walked into that church and he killed all those black people, how they just handcuffed him and took him to get food afterwards. For him to be in Charleston, of all places, and to say that he doesn't think qualified immunity should be removed. Yikes. And these are just some things I think he just don't think about. Like, I think there's some things is like, how can I put this? The way people come at me is like this, right? People say, well, Sabby, some people are one issue voter, single issue voter. I totally get that. And for those people on an issue like this, that could be a no for them. If your single issue is policing, this might be a no for you. If your single issue is abortion, this might be a no for you. If your single issue is Israel-Palestine foreign policy, he might be a no for you. So when we talk about some people are single issue voters, I totally get that and totally understand that. But what single issue are we talking about? So let me let this finish.
On your website, it says transform the police. In an interview, you said you wanted to remove.
Yeah, I don't. That is an error. We do not. I do not want to. I don't think it's feasible to remove qualified immunity.
Okay.
I think the police are having a hard enough time hiring people right now, and that a lot of interactions that are a lot of interactions of the police have nothing to do with civil rights or race, and we can't put each individual police.
That is a huge no. Again, think about where he is. This is Charleston, South Carolina. A lot of the interactions with police have nothing to do with race. Bullshit. Is RFK Jr. talking to black people in Charleston about this issue? About how they're stopped by the police for no reason? How police just shoot unarmed black people in the back, but they handcuff the white guy who shoots up all these people in this church? For RFK Jr. to sit here during this interview and knowing where he is at that point in time, I feel like, again, it's like reading the room, feeling the optics, knowing where you are. The environment is especially important. Most people, I think, would have lied. And I'm not saying he should lie, but I don't think he understands. I don't really think he gets this issue. That you can't just come there and say, well, no, it's not racial. Really, Bobby? Not for you? Not for you? How many black people he having this conversation with? How many? Even the reporter is white. Let me let it finish.
Police officers in a position where anybody who has an interaction with them can then sue them individually. And
so you don't have any plans in place to remove qualified immunity?
No, I'm not going to remove qualified immunity, but I'm going to use the Justice Department to address any abuse of the use, particularly of deadly force, in interactions between black Americans and police or anybody else. So, and I think that that's a civil rights issue that has to be addressed, and I'm going to address it aggressively.
But if it's a civil rights issue that needs to be addressed, then why did you say before that race has nothing to do with it? So there have been some missteps here. The website says one thing. What he said in this interview is different. That's a big thing. If your website says that you will remove qualified immunity and you are not for that, I don't know what happened there. I don't know what happened. But that being said, he got a lot of pushback from people in reference to that too. I'll go ahead and put up the other one, Eric, whenever you're ready. And then I'll go to the statement that he made in reference to Cornell West, because I want to show you guys, I wanted to show you all of this first so you can see why I think he's saying what he said. So here's him walking back the abortion comment. RFK Jr.'s campaign tries to walk back his support of 3-month federal abortion ban. So this went out pretty quickly after that interview. And it says here, Mr. Kennedy's position on abortion is that it is always the woman's right to choose. He does not support legislation banning abortion. The campaign said in a statement attempting to clarify remarks Kennedy made to an NBC reporter at the Iowa State Fair that he had prompted praise from a major anti-abortion rights group. So they issued this statement after that interview. Now, all of that being said, everything that I just showed you, if you combine the two together, that makes me wonder, because of all those things, is this the reason why RFK Jr. put out this statement? Cornel West is a truth teller. I'm glad he's part of the presidential race because he's a thoughtful, brave, compassionate, and honest person who sees how devastating America's forever wars have been to this country and the world, and who understands how corrupt corporate influence has hijacked our government and both political parties, especially the Democratic Party elites. And he goes on to say here, Dr. West brings civility, decency, and respect into politics, qualities sadly lacking in today's political culture. His candidacy can help raise the level of political discourse in this country. Hashtag Kennedy 24. So what was that all about? This was August 13th, 9:55 a.m. What was this all about? What was that for? Why is this praise for Cornell West all of a sudden? And yes, they've both been attacked. But I just find this interesting considering after those two mishaps that just happened, where is this coming from? And so I saw that and I thought to myself, is it possible that he could be considering, if he doesn't win the Democratic primary, which he won't, I'm just keeping it real, is it possible that he may be considering a third party or independent run? And if that is the case, and we'll go ahead and bring up the poll whenever you're ready, Eric. If that's the case, and he is considering that, I don't think he would come out and say it if he is, but he is considering that. Do you think there could be a ticket with RFK Jr. and Cornel West? Obviously, given he would have to change his position on Israel and Palestine, that would be a big one. Obviously, I don't think Cornel West would run with somebody who feels that way about the position that RFK Jr. does. But do you think that a unity ticket could be possible? I haven't seen this poll since I went live, so I'm curious. Let's see. Okay. We have over 1,300 votes. If RFK Jr. loses the primary, should Cornel West and RFK Jr. run together as Greens? This is a close poll. I've never had a poll this close, I think. 48% said yes, 34% of you said no, and 18% of you said not sure. That is interesting. I should screenshot that and that's interesting. Well, Dr. West will be back next week, so I'll get to talk to him about more of this. But that is interesting. I just don't know where that came from all of a sudden. So that made me think a little bit. James says YouTube is suggesting on autoplay The Blind Side, buy or rent. Of course. Of course they are. Z Manny, Sabby, good point. West has some big advantages. RE, this media obstacle, he has better exposure. Dems will try to drive Greens off the ballot to prevent people from voting for him. Bingos. Ravina, Cornel West said that he's running to destroy the system, not to work inside it. Leroy, shout out to Leroy for being a member for 24 months. Holy wows. Leroy been with me for a long time. A lot of you are newbies. Leroy's been around for a long time. Says, I detest Whoopi. She gets paid by the migraine medication company Nurtec ODT, and she's part of the problem why we have migraines. That's a good one. Thank you for the super chat, Rodrigo. RFK off the record said he will not run third party. If it's off the record, how do you guys know? Thank you, Alex Fox. You break things down better than anyone. I learned a lot here. Thanks, Sabby. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Janice. RFK switching depending on his audience. He was for repealing qualified immunity when talking to Black reporters, then backtracked. He has no principled positions. And if that's the case, Janice, that's a problem. That's something Cornel West mentioned in that interview he had with Stephen A. He said, like, some candidates are just switching their position based on who they're talking to. That's not principled. So if that's the case, that's something people need to pay attention to.